There's sign-up sheets for those of you that haven't signed up here in the front, and there are also handouts related to the long-term lead and copper rule that's just come out. And so I invite you to take copies of that if you haven't already gotten them or signed in. So I want to welcome you all. We're very glad to have you here at DWAG. Welcome all those who are watching through VTC. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. If at any point, we're more than happy to take those questions. And those of you that are watching through VTC, if you could send your questions to the DWAG email box, that's dwawg@tceq.texas.gov. Sean Abels will be seeing those emails and passing those questions to us to answer. Again, that email address is dwawg@tceq.texas.gov. So we're going to start with a big announcement, which is that our long-term team leader or section manager for the drinking water standards section, Gary Chauvin, has left the agency. He's no longer with us. We're sad to see him go, and we are in the process now of selecting a new section manager. In the interim, we are rotating the duties related to section manager between staff in the drinking water standards section. So myself, I'm Stephen Swearinga, Casey Stenson, and Jessica Hoke, who is out this week. So obviously she's not answering questions this week. At the end of this week, it'll pass over to Jessica. And of course, you can contact any one of us or Carrie Michelle or Patricia Wise, our director and assistant directors. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have. With that, I'll move on to the agenda. And I'll start with our occupational licensing brethren, Shannon Watson, who's the new section manager, and Tamara Calhoun, who's the new team leader, if you guys would like to go.
Thank you. We really don't have many updates. We're pretty streamlined at the moment, thankfully. But we generally present numbers for the public to know how we're doing. And this is a comparison from third quarter of FY19 to fourth quarter of FY19. For BPAT, we were down 200 applications from last quarter, and we were down 73 tests administered. Pass rate for the BPAT exam remained about the same, and total licenses for BPAT program remained just under 6,000. For CSI, we had about the same applications, about 200 for the fourth quarter. We administered almost 200 exams, which is about 50 less than third quarter. The pass rate for the exams remained about the same, and total licenses for the CSI remains about 2,100, which is down about 30, or up from 31 from the third quarter. For water licenses, applications received was down about 167. Tests administered was about 200 less this quarter. Pass rate remained about the same of average of all the exams in the water program, and we're just shy under 17,000 licensees in the water program, which remained about the same from the third quarter. Any questions on licensing numbers? Okay, thank you.
Any questions at all? They're needing to leave right away, so if there are any questions, we'll take them now. No? Okay. Well, then we'll move on to the Office of Compliance and Enforcement with Shannon Frazier.
Good morning, everyone. So the information below is the PWS activities conducted for the OCE regional staff in FY19. There were 1,025 complaint investigations, 253 focused investigations, 221 compliance record review investigations, 47 follow-up investigations, 365 recon investigations, and 2,126 CCIs. The first quarter FY20 numbers will be presented at the next meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Shannon. Any questions for Shannon? No? Then Michelle, we're making a slight adjustment to the agenda here, and Michelle Risco, if you could please give your updates, we'd appreciate it.
Good morning, everyone. The Drinking Water Special Function section has a few updates that I wanted to bring to your attention. You'll notice through the update document that we are doing a superior systems review. We've had some letters go out to rescind or pull back those rankings. We've had some people try to address their outliers. So in order to be a part of that program and to be recognized as superior, you need to meet all the requirements of 290.47A, which is being in line with every single physical requirement of subchapter D, and then also being in line with all of the primary and secondary standards of subchapter F. So if you have an outstanding violation with the region, if you have an outstanding violation with Water Supply Division, you're not meeting that requirement. I wanted to bring that to people's attention because we have sent letters out to a few water systems who then it realizes they come to the attention that they actually have something outstanding. So if you are with a water system, I would encourage you, if you are superior, to take a look at what may be outstanding violations with the region or outstanding violations on Drinking Water Watch and address those in a timely fashion, because we would like to keep people having a superior status. We'd like to have a good reflection of what the water is like here in the state of Texas. Also coming up, you'll notice there's some updates in your DWOG summary that the emergency response plans, the timelines for those are coming up for a lot of the larger systems, with some of those being due as early as March of next year. So if you haven't started moving forward with developing your emergency response plan for your system, please take a look at those dates. We have some resources. Texas AWWA's has some resources, and the EPA also has resources on their website to assist you in doing your vulnerability assessments and then also applying that to make sure that you have an applicable emergency response plan. Especially in a state of Texas where we have crazy things happen every day. There's hurricanes, there's tornadoes, there's everything. It's best to be prepared, and that's the point of an ERP, is an all hazards analysis. So please take a look at that and be ready to respond when your system has something, already have a plan in place. One other thing I'd like to mention, and I'll kind of set the stage for the larger overview, and then each section will give their kind of what steps they're taking to try and work towards this. But the EPA has put forth what are called national compliance initiatives. One of the most applicable to us is they've put forth a NCI for reduction of health-based violations at community water systems. They really want to make sure that the people who are living every day to day in a community in the United States are served by water that will not negatively impact their health. That's right in line with what we try to do as a program. So we are working to find and reach out and provide assistance to those systems that are experiencing health-based issues, whether it's a DBP issue, whether it's a naturally occurring contaminant issue, whether it's an RTCR assessment issue, and trying to help people come into compliance on those items. So like I said, we'll let the other systems kind of discuss what their section is doing to address those. But I wanted to let you know that, once again, if you are experiencing health-based violations, we have assistance available to you, and we'll be actively working not only to benefit your customers, but also to ensure that we can assist in this national compliance initiative. With that said, I'd like to pass along to my team leader of the Drinking Water Inventory and Protection team, Mr. Patrick Kading.
All right. Thank you. So I just had a couple updates from my team. The first one is the Public Health Service fee invoices will be going out in November, and those invoices will be due December 30th of this year. Just a reminder, the Public Health Service fee is based on the connections served by your public water system, so it's always a good idea to when you're having a comprehensive compliance investigation from the region office, it's always good to make sure that you are on the same page with the investigator as far as what connections are being noted for your system, because that is what the Public Health Service fee is based on, those connections. So once again, those invoices will be going out in November, and they will be due, payment will be due December 30th of this year. And then also another fee, the regulatory assessment fee. We will be sending out reminder postcards in December to all utilities that need to pay RAF, report and pay RAF. And then the reporting of revenues will be due at the end of January 2020. So once again, those postcards will be going out in December. All reporting should be done online, and the postcards will give you instructions on where to go for that. And then you can either pay online, which is easiest, or you can ask to get an invoice when you're reporting, and the invoice would be sent to you. But I would strongly suggest doing that all online and getting it over with, and moving on. And my last announcement is a sad one. Unfortunately, we are losing Carmen Portillo. She is retiring at the end of the month. Carmen's been with drinking water for several years, and I'm sure many of you have communicated with her. She has overall 34 years of service with the state. So, like I said, she'll be retiring at the end of the month. So, if you regularly call her directly or send emails to her directly, I would suggest sending those to myself, Patrick Kading, or contacting the front desk for the Water Supply Division at 512-239-4691 and ask to speak to inventory staff. And I would also suggest giving Carmen a call in the next couple weeks and congratulating her on her retirement. And her service will definitely be missed, but she's been great for the team. So, you can also send condolences to me as well. So that'll work too. So, and that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Emma, the Drinking Water Technical Review Team updates, if you will.
Good morning, guys. Happy Tuesday. Just a couple updates from our team. We have some new staff since last WOG. One is Anthony Thompson. He'll be on the data side of things, kind of working with migrating samples from labs into our database, mostly for lead and copper and chem samples. And then also Emily Green, who will be on the enforcement side of things, but also doing a little bit of pre-enforcement outreach and some consumer confidence rule duties. Speaking of consumer confidence rule, we just ran compliance for the 2018 calendar year, which was due July 1st, 2019. So if you get a violation letter from us, please give us a call so we can get you back into compliance. And then last thing about our team is with the legislative session, House Bill 3142 had the courtesy reminder bill, which is for TCEQ to establish a system to send out regular reporting reminders to water systems. So we'll be on the data side setting up a software for water systems to register with a water system and start getting reminders from us. So if you'd like to volunteer, we'll definitely give more updates by next DWOG, and you can definitely send me or Michelle or the DWOG email if you have any questions about that. That is all I have.
Sorry, one sec. Carrie Michelle, Sean, would you hook her up with a microphone?
It's all right. I'm sure I'll be talking loud enough. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I just kind of wanted to reiterate what Emma was saying, and it's really important that you guys understand where we're headed with the alert system. We've had a lot of folks that can't or are struggling to keep up with all the requirements, whether it's reporting or sampling or anything like that. So one of the ideas that we talked with the legislature was coming up with a system that's going to provide alerts to you all about when things are due, okay? Now, one of the things that we're struggling with is also trying to make sure that that notice is a courtesy notice, okay? And you guys will have to sign up for that program. And because we have so many requirements, we're going to have to take it in small chomps about where and what those requirements will be. So any input from you, we're probably going to be looking for systems to start a pilot program to make sure that it makes sense. And it's something, you know, I don't want to send 252 emails to you every month or texts or however you guys decide that you want the information. So I think that I really would appreciate input from y'all through DWOG at what kind of requirements are more important to you to start out. Make sure, again, that this thing is working and that we're going to request some pilot folks to test it out for us. So anybody that's willing to look at that once the system's established, it would be really appreciative, and getting that input about those reminders that are most important to you all. Okay, so we are required to establish that system. There's no timeline for that system, but we'll probably get that up and rolling within the next 6 months to a year. So please think about what it is that you all would like to hear from us or not hear from us, but you guys will certainly have that option of signing up. So thank you.
Thank you, Carrie Michelle. And as she mentioned, we are very interested in what feedback you do have. We don't want to overburden people with a whole bunch of reminders, but we do want to assist those who are struggling with the reminders they need to be successful. So please take an opportunity to think about what would help you as a system, and maybe what would help a struggling system, so that we can benefit everybody moving forward with this, because that is the intent, is to help people out. Not bug you to death. Also, you'll see this coming up later, and we'll have a small presentation on it, but I wanted to make sure that you guys were also aware that there was another House bill passed, 3552, which is discussing the need for public notice related determination of fluoride. So stay tuned. That is coming later this afternoon, or is this morning. It's not going to be that long a morning, right? With that said, I would like to move on to updates from the Plan and Technical Review section. Mr. Joel Klump.
Good morning. I'm going to talk about some highlights from activities within the Plan and Technical Review section, and then hand it over to Dorothy Young, who's going to give you some updates on capacity development activities. So we have detailed information about section activities in your DWOG staff summary document, but some of the highlights include the Drinking Water Infrastructure Needs Survey. As mentioned at the last DWOG meeting, the EPA has indicated that the 4-year survey of infrastructure needs will take place in 2020. The survey is very important for water system funding, as the sum of the state needs are used to determine the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund allotment that Texas will receive. The survey includes all systems with a population greater than 100,000 and a sampling of systems with populations less than 100,000. At this time, the sampling for small and medium systems has not been released, so the only thing we know for sure is that systems with those largest populations will be included. The American Water Infrastructure Act requires that this survey include an inventory of lead service lines and the cost to replace those lines. So TCEQ is requesting that systems with populations greater than 100,000 begin estimating their lead service lines if they're unsure of the inventory. And EPA will be providing additional training for TCEQ and Texas Water Development Board staff and contractors who will be working on the survey, and that training, the next training will take place in December. Shifting over to drought, we did see an intensification of drought over this last summer in various spots around the state. There's more details on what % of the state is impacted by drought conditions in the staff summary. And then, as Michelle was talking about the National Compliance Initiative, or NCI, related to reducing the % of community water systems with health-based violations, some of the actions taking place in my section related to this, we took a look at the list of water systems that are currently identified as violators. And we looked at water systems that submitted exception requests for innovative treatment to address a violation. And for those water systems that received exception requests, but then it's been over a year and we haven't seen a plan submittal, we're going to give a courtesy call to those water systems and say, what's the status? Why haven't you moved on to submitting plans and specs to move forward with this treatment? We're also going to be giving courtesy calls to water systems that did submit plans and specifications for a treatment process to address the violation over a year ago, but are still showing up on the list. And so that raises the question, was that treatment ever installed, or was it installed and perhaps there's an issue with how effective that treatment is? So again, we'll reach out to those water systems and try to determine if we can provide some additional assistance. And then taking a step back, for any water system with a violation, I'd like to remind you of our Financial, Managerial, and Technical Assistance Program, the FMT Assistance Program. Water systems can request free on-site assistance from a contractor who will come out to your water system and address questions and issues that you have. And lastly, I'd like to note that the largest category of health-based violations is for disinfection byproducts. And through our FMT Assistance Program, we have a specific one-day workshop focusing on disinfection byproducts. And specifically, that's for DBP control for surface water treatment plants. So if you are a water system with a surface water source and you're having any questions or concerns or issues with disinfection byproduct compliance, this one-day workshop, again provided on-site, is available to you, and you can reach out to me or anybody with our FMT Assistance Program to get that scheduled. And now I'd like to hand it over to Dorothy.
Good morning. Just have two quick announcements. One is about the next TWIC, which is the Texas Water Infrastructure Coordination Committee meeting. That's an umbrella organization of funding, regulatory, and assistance providers, where we try to provide communities one-stop shopping for funding and other assistance. It's also a great opportunity if communities are sort of puzzled as to how to move forward. We have a regular meeting in the morning, and then at 2:30 we have guests come, either on the phone or in person. Our next meeting is hosted by Texas AWWA, but it's actually going to be in the room next door to this room. And that is now, I think, confirmed for Wednesday, December 4th. Elston Johnson will be sending out an invitation. You got my contact information, I believe, Dorothy Young. You can always call me if you're interested in participating or want to attend a meeting. It's a great opportunity. I think a lot of folks have benefited from either our workshops or coming to the meetings to talk to a bunch of funding agencies and other folks all in one room at one time. The other thing I want to talk about, we talked a little bit about at the Drinking Water Conference. We're starting a new recognition program, or not a new recognition program, a new category in our recognition program. And it's called Water Partners, Water Systems Helping Water Systems. We're always really interested in success stories that we might not know about because you all are just doing your work and going about your business, and you've figured out better ways to do it. So we're trying to recognize that and find out more about it. Partnerships are a great way to move forward, and we'd like to hear about them and recognize folks. So we're going to open that up and put it on the website as soon as we get the criteria finalized. There are going to be 4 categories. The first is mentoring. And that's we know how important that is when folks give each other advice, when older operators take younger operators under their wings, when one system helps another, when you go and say, I don't know what to do about my engineer, can you help me with that? Any kind of mentoring, we're looking for folks to nominate themselves or someone that they know about. The second one is emergency response, and that's pretty easy to identify. You know, they came and helped me. They came from the Panhandle when we had a hurricane, or they came from the coast when we had a wildfire. Any kind of thing like that we would like to know about. Emergency interconnects is another example. The third category is operations and training, and this includes sharing equipment, sharing training opportunities, Some folks do it at the Texas Water Utilities Association meetings. We just want to hear more about those kind of innovative ways you're working together. And lastly, are actual consolidations or mergers. We know there are some cities that have been really proactive about taking over some of the troubled little water systems around them. We want to hear more about that, what worked, what didn't. Maybe we know of some water supply corporations, the directors don't want to be on the board anymore, but they have enough folks who are interested for one board, so they merge. And so those are kind of stories we're looking for, and we'll be putting more information on the website about that. So any questions for me? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. Any questions about anything in general related to the plan and technical review section? Thank you very much.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about the drinking water standards section. We've already given you our one big announcement with Gary's departure, and I encourage you again, if there's anything that we can do to reach out to us or to our division director or our assistant division director, Carrie Michelle and Patricia Wise. As far as the NCI standards, our section is mostly making referrals for the FMT assistance and the assistance that Dorothy offers. We're also the ones that are mostly issuing the violations, so we don't have as big a role to play in how that's being resolved. But we are more than happy to connect you to any resources and provide all the resources that we have available. So Jessica Hoke is out today, and so I'm going to be doing the updates for her. I've got some lead and copper information here for you, and we had a question through the DWOG email box about where they can get this information. Sean has posted a link on the DWOG page. It's also posted on the EPA's website. Yesterday, I Googled it as LCR, and it came right up, and so you'd be able to find it that way. Also, in the program updates, Jessica provided numerous links for you all. So the EPA announced the release of their proposed revisions on October 10th, and we've got 60 days to provide comments. That 60-day period starts when the proposed rule is published in the Federal Register. And so I encourage you to begin reading now. We have all started doing our homework, and there are some significant changes that are happening there. As far as lead and copper tap sampling compliance, the reduced 2019 monitoring period has just ended. So systems are encouraged to review their sample data and to make sure that they're delivering their lead consumer notices. And then on the microbial side of things, and we've got Lily Johnson here who's going to talk a little bit about this in her presentation, but the proper bacteriological monitoring, including the documentation of monitoring, is critical for protection of public health, and Lily's going to go through that quite a bit. And then our TCR program is reviewing our documentation to make sure that samples are in compliance with our quality assurance performance plan requirements. So she also has a number of other pieces of information here. I encourage you to look at that. She's got good statistics here on the number of RTCR violations. Mostly what we're seeing are monitoring and reporting violations. So again, Lily will be going over that in her presentation. And then we also have Casey Stinson here, who's the team leader for the drinking water quality team, who's going to introduce a few of his folks and talk about some of his programs.
Good morning, everybody. Just want to take the opportunity to introduce some of my fantastic new staff. I know it's always handy to have a name to go along with a compliance program, so you know who you want to reach out to whenever you have issues. So the first I'll introduce is Colt Kernan. He's in the back here for any of you that are sitting here that'd like to put a face with a name. He's going to be our inorganics and radionuclides compliance officer. The next is Rhea Seipert. She is our disinfection byproducts compliance officer. Mr. Ian Sharp. He is helping out with operational evaluation level reports, so he'll likely be the one contacting you if you trigger one of those. Additionally, we have Aaron Vu. He's the newest compliance officer on the surface water treatment rule. Additionally, just wanted to give you all some updates. We're in the process of doing monitoring and reporting compliance for the chemical side of the house. And so if you receive any of those violations, if you have a question, feel free to reach out to myself or the compliance officers I just introduced. Additionally, we just passed the due date for the disinfectant level quarterly operating report submittal. Our E2 page went down, so there were some problems submitting those DLQORs by the 10th. So this is your reminder. Make sure you don't wait till the final day that it's due. It can be submitted anytime up to the 10th. This is a bit of a vague update. I'll give you all more information as I have it. We've been notified that there will be an increase in the laboratory analysis fees for chemical compliance. From what we've heard, it's going to be about a 3% increase, but once we have final numbers and the actual start date, we'll let you all know. And finally, on the surface water treatment rule, RG 211 is currently undergoing revisions, and again, I will give updates whenever those are complete. I think Gary Regner has some more information about the laboratory analysis fees. That was all I had.
And Carl's coming up as well.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Gary Regner with the Water Supply Division. So, like Casey mentioned, DSHS, the Department of State Health Services, will be adjusting their laboratory analysis fees. That will go into effect January 1st, 2020. It is a 3% increase across the board. I have printed out a list of the new fees, so if you want to get a copy of that, I'll leave them up here on the podium. It has been 8 full years since the last time fees changed, so they're kind of long overdue. And I suspect that in the coming years, there probably will be some small increases again to keep up with inflation. Did you want to say something?
Carl, when do you propose starting the new fee rate?
January 1st. Right, so anything submitted after that time.
Carl, can you repeat that for folks that are on
The fee rates will go in effect January 1st for any samples submitted. After that, that'll apply to them.
Is that, and those have been set so that you can go ahead and post the new rates? They're available now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they have been sent out.
Website as well, and you have that on your website right now?
There's probably a link to the whole changes because it's to the whole lab for all the testing we do besides drinking water.
So on October 1st, DSHS sent out a letter to all of their customers. So it's likely you've already actually seen that and knew about that increase coming. And within the letter, there was a link to a much larger document that's like 25 pages. It lists every single fee that's changing, but that includes hundreds of different medical tests as well. So what I've done is pulled out just the environmental water testing fees, and they're on this document. And like I said, I'll leave that up here for you guys. Any questions on that? Okay, thank you.
I did want to have one quick item related to online reporting. We would encourage people to report often and report early. We are experiencing some issues on the 9th and 10th of the month through the STEERS application because there's so many people trying to report for not just our program, but all the other programs that the agency administers. So if you're doing a DLQOR, if you're doing BAC-Ts, if you're doing water quality parameters, if at all possible, especially if you're a laboratory, try to report those whenever you have them available and ready and QC'd. So that way we're not experiencing so much volume all at once, which is challenging our systems, but also so that it's getting in on time, and your customers are being served, and you hopefully are not experiencing downtime on our applications. We are trying every time to keep them up and running for you guys. But every once in a while, we do hit an opportunity where we're exceeding the resources available because everybody's trying to use it at once. So I'd encourage you, if possible, to report as soon as you have your results available, QC'd and ready to go. As always, reach out to us if you're having any issues. Leah Postlo and Sunthini are both available to discuss any issues you might be having with the E2 application.
All right, so let's talk lead and copper really quick, because I think it's really important that you guys are tuning into this early, okay? We're still digesting it. We've had a couple of drop out of your seat moments, and you guys will as well. And one of the things that I think all of us are going to have to grasp is that there's no getting around it. At some point, you all need to start thinking about your lead service lines, okay? It's coming around. You're going to have to submit an inventory to us, and so I can't emphasize enough that you all need to start thinking about this now, because it's a potentially very challenging issue, especially with our larger cities, because you're going to be required to find those guys, okay? And there's lots of cities that already have a voluntary program in place. I can't encourage you enough to have conversations with those guys to see how they do it. I think EPA is going to take the approach that if you can't find them and identify them, we're going to assume that you have them, and you're going to be treated within the rule and require those kinds of issues based on if it is a lead service line. So there's not going to be any opportunity to say, I just don't know. You're going to have to find them, and you're going to have to start thinking about how those are going to be identified within the system. The other big thing that's happening in the rule is that there's a new trigger level, okay? And so what that trigger level does is requiring you to take action prior to hitting the action level. So there's going to be some requirements, I think it's 10 ppb, where you're going to have to do some action. A lot of it has to stem around a corrosion control study. I think that you guys need to start thinking about having a corrosion control study and looking at that, especially if you had one from 20, 25 years ago. I think it's time for you to start looking at getting a new one together, because those requirements are gonna come around again. The other big thing is schools, okay? And Patricia's here to talk a little bit about the school grant program. They're having a voluntary sampling where we've got funds available for schools to do that, but there's also some requirements for the system to sample at schools. Okay, so let's talk about what that time frame is. One, we understand that you guys don't know where your schools are, right? So you're going to have conversations in the event that that's adopted in the rule about where your schools are located, and not only schools, but child care facilities, all right? And what the rule says is that within a 5-year period, systems are required to sample at schools and child care facilities for areas that you serve, all right? And basically what they want is 20% of those schools and child care facilities every year. So within a 5-year period, those are covered, okay? So that's substantial. There's going to be a lot of costs involved for you all, so I can encourage you to make sure that you are providing your comments and that you're starting to have conversations now. Obviously, it's going to be a few years before this is adopted and put in place, but these are big changes that are going to affect your systems. So you all need to start thinking it, particularly lead service lines and those inventories. Those are going to be the big one for you, and you all need to start thinking about how you're going to do that challenge, okay? We'll start getting some information together to get out on the website about people who do lead service lines. There's a lot of states that already have those requirements beyond what the EPA requires right now, and so we'll try to find those. You might be wanting to have conversations with those facilities to see how they do it based on the size, and maybe get some good information. That's something we can get on our website for you all so that you can start figuring out how you're going to tackle this. It's not easy, and we understand that, and we've got some lessons learned from other states that we'll be talking to, and hopefully find some common sense approaches that are going to work for everybody. Again, if you all have any questions, please feel free to call us as we're kind of getting through this and proposing comments and working with our state administrator associations to see what we have to say about these. Does anybody have any questions? I know we haven't had a whole lot of time to grasp this, but certainly we're working on it.
On child care facilities, are they talking commercial child care or in-home child care private?
They're talking licensed facilities, and yes, you do have residential child care facilities that are licensed. Okay. But Mark, did you have a question? The EPA guy has a question.
Former retired as of August 30th. I'm now with Top Program. I believe, Joel, you said something about needs survey. Systems over 100,000 have to include lead service line inventory in their survey. So that's not, right now it's proposed under lead copper for all systems, but it's not a proposal under needs survey, correct?
That's correct.
Yes. Sean?
Do you know for us as a utility where we could go to find the licensed daycares? Because I'm thinking churches, because it's K through 12. So you're talking kindergarten programs in churches, daycares, like she said, homes. Is there a place where we can go and find that information?
Yes. A lot of TEA has school information, and I believe, is it DISHES? Department
Yes.
of State Health Services that has child care facilities.
Correct.
And I'm sure that they're aware of this, and they're going to probably start getting that information together. What's going to be difficult, as far as us helping you, is we're not sure what your service areas are. We're going to have to figure that out. For those of you that have CCNs, that we'll have to work with the PUC. But we'll also have to get something for you all to tell us how many schools and child care facilities that you have in your service areas. So again, these are big things that we're going to have to start thinking about. No guarantee that it's going to be adopted, but I think certainly it's going to be enough for you all to consider this in your budget and the challenges that you could be facing in the next couple of years. Any other questions? Charlie?
Just one comment on this daycare in schools. I think the key issue for all of us, no matter system size, is how much sampling are we going to need to do in each school? And we're going to have to pour through the rule and see what it says. But that you're right. That's going to be a key impact as I see it on us. It's going to be a key impact in figuring out where they are, getting the samples collected, and then the laboratory effort, all the laboratory effort behind that.
Correct, and I think it's written right now at each outlet. Okay, so you have to think about potable water that gets served out of every outlet at a school or child care facility. So that's no small feat. So
I'm with Fort Worth, and our Fort Worth ISD did their sampling. And one of the things that we came across was that kindergarten classrooms, I think first grade, have they have faucets inside those classrooms because they're self-contained. So luckily, what we found out was Fort Worth ISD actually had a guy who used to work for a public water system on there that worked in the Fort Worth ISD. So he was able to come up with a sampling plan for all of their schools. That really helped us as a utility because you don't necessarily know how that water is moving. You got the place where food prep is going on. You got athletic centers. You got K through, kindergartners, first graders. So that sampling plan was huge for some of those schools, like those high schools, it was 100, or more samples in a school.
correct.
Can I tag on to what Stacy's saying? City of Austin's where I am, Charlie Maddox, Austin Water. AISD a number of years ago did their own sampling plan or program. Now, I don't think they did every outlet, but they did one, and they used LCRA as a certified lab. So, and I don't expect us to know this question. I'm just throwing it out for the moment. What if you do have a school district who has done some sampling? They've done something, right? And they've been to a certified lab, and they have some data. How will that enter into this requirement process? I don't think we know the answer to that yet, but that's something to think about and something to put on our list of questions. And I think it's really important for all of us as utilities, read this rule and comment on it. Comment on this aspect. make comments on how this, I don't think any of us doubt the need to do this. It's just the magnitude of that effort that's there could be overwhelming if it's not managed in some logical process or sampling program.
Right, and the other thing I wanted to add, I think right now they're only talking about, as far as an exemption, are schools built after January 2014. And so we're still going to have to figure out, and I'm not quite sure that, we've got one source available to us that is going to tell us when the schools were built. Some of those that's involved in a school district where they know that. Sometimes the associations don't understand when the school was built. So that's another challenging part that we're going to have to try to find and try to get a resource in order for that information to be available. So we've got some things to work out here, and as things start to solidify, we might want to start thinking about getting subcommittees together and start talking about common sense approaches so that when we get ready to do rule writing, that we're following the intent of the rule, but we're also making it a logical, common sense approach for everybody, okay? And again, Patricia's going to talk a little bit about the voluntary program, and I think what's going to happen is that if schools come in for money for that sampling, as she's going to talk about what that means, they also might be looking to help and having conversations with you as public water systems to help them understand a little bit about what's happening. Obviously, the 3Ts guidance is going to play a very important role in this, but again, we're going to be available to schools to provide information to them, but again, as our water systems, they might be looking to you to help them figure out how they're going to do this and what a lot of this information means. This is a new thing to schools too, and so we're going to have to do some outreach and help the schools understand kind of how to do this appropriately so we get some good results. Patricia, do you want to go ahead and talk about that?
All right, good morning. Well, on the heels of that, I'm here to talk about the voluntary program. And we had some handouts as you walked in. And this is about the Water Infrastructure Improvement for the Nations Act. It's the WIN Act. It's also called the Lead Testing in School and Child Care Program Drinking Water Grant. So essentially, this is to provide funds to states to distribute to schools to assist them in establishing their own testing program. Each state in the nation is participating, and the governor selected the TCEQ as the designated one for Texas. And over the next 2 years, there will be $3.331 million that the TCEQ will be distributing and working with schools and child care facilities. I just wanted to go through the objectives of this grant. Number one was to reduce children's exposure to lead and help states target schools who have been unable to pay for testing. So we're already aware that many of the schools, like Stacy and Charlie pointed out, the bigger school districts have already done this testing, but we know that there's many smaller systems that either don't have the expertise or they don't have the funding to do that. So those are going to be the ones that we're targeting to prioritize. They also are wanting us to establish or get schools and child care facilities to establish their own programs to test in their facilities, and to be able to utilize the EPA's 3Ts for reducing lead in drinking water in schools and child care facilities. Use that guidance document as their template. Another one of the objectives is to enhance communities, parents, teachers, their cooperation and trust with the local and the state officials, and also to to foster sustainable partnerships. And based on the proposals of the new lead and copper rule, I think you're going to be seeing the opportunities for water systems to engage with schools. As Stacy pointed out, there's going to be developing those sample siting plans are going to be an extreme challenge for schools. Whether the water systems can partner and help them on this is how you develop a plan. Even how to do the testing for it. Many schools have no idea how to even engage in the testing aspects of it. So that is what this program is being established to do, is to get the state agencies to work with the local partners, whether it be the water systems or anyone else that's out there available to help these schools and child care facilities establish their own program and do some kind of testing in their facilities. And as we've heard, this will be looking at what the revisions to the lead and copper rule are going to do and how that's going to play into what water systems are going to do with the school systems in the future. As far as the status right now, the TCEQ has submitted their work plan to EPA, and right now we're just awaiting on comments or that to be approved and for the funding to actually be granted. So over the next couple years is when we will be implementing this. So, all right, that's all I have on that topic for now. So, anybody have any questions? We'll see if we have an answer.
So, if I remember correctly, as a laboratory, the plan for the 3 Ts is a different sampling than what we normally do for the sample container. So for labs, they have to be very cautious about if that school wants to get funding, they have to go with that sampling plan, which is a different sample container and everything.
Yes, ma'am, you are correct. It is a much smaller sample volume. And so we will have to be very clear on the instructions that is put out. But yes, we will be using accredited laboratories, but yes, you're absolutely right, it is a different sample volume.
And it is a different sampling pool in the rule as well. It's the 250 mil.
Yeah.
I think what's different is a wide mouth.
Yes.
But it is it's slightly different
Yep.
for the schools as well.
Yep. Okay, anything else? All right, very good.
Thank you very much, Patricia and Carrie Michelle. We are now at a point where we can either take a break or we can move on with Lily's presentation. Is there any inclination for a break? If not, then we'll go ahead and move forward with Lily's, and we'll check in with y'all after that and see whether or not we need a break. Thank you very much, Lily. If you want to come on up.
So I'm Lillian Johnson. I'm a compliance officer for the revised total call form rule. You may have seen me around somewhere. I was at the PDW conference. This presentation was actually presented by Charlotte Pope at the PDW conference. So this is not new information, but always good a refresher. So we're going to be talking about completing and correcting the microbial reporting form that is submitted with your microbial samples to your lab. These presentation goals, we're going to review the microbial reporting form in its entirety, identify the required fields, and then we're going to discuss a lot of the common errors that we see in documentation. It is a really sad day when the sample was taken. It was taken to the lab, but the documentation was incorrect, and we're not able to accept that sample, which results in a violation. So we want to reduce that as much as possible. So the microbial reporting form does conform to the Quality Assurance Project Plan as required, and it is submitted with any bacteriological sample to the lab by the operator. The public water systems should and must review this form for completeness prior to submission. If you do drop it off to the lab and it is seen that it is incomplete, the lab is required to reject that sample, again resulting in a violation, which we don't want. The MRF also serves as a chain of custody and the sample data report. So this is the microbial reporting form that is approved by the QAPP. You should be pretty familiar with this form, or your operators should be very familiar with this form. The red outlined areas are the required fields that the operator must fill out before submitting this microbial reporting form, or MRF, to the laboratory. This is at the top left-hand side of the microbial reporting form. This identifies the public water system information, the public water system ID, and the public water system name. A lot of operators deal with a lot of different public water systems, so sometimes public water system IDs and names can be switched or confused. This is a big issue. Also the county contact information and the sampler information. All of that is very important information if we need to contact the sampler or the public water system representative to have this documentation corrected. The first and last name, license number, signature, and association to the system is all required. So this is what it's going to look like for a routine distribution sample submission. This is towards the bottom of the page, so in the bottom red outlined area. This is going to be the majority of samples that you bring into the laboratory. The sample identification location is required. This is going to be the address or the identified location of the sample collection point that is identified in the sample siting plan for the system. It should be identical as what is listed in the SSP. In addition, the date and time collection is required, mark AM and PM. The sample type, routine distribution, this is required to count for compliance for your required routine distribution samples every month. In addition, the chlorine residual, absolutely required. If this is missed at all, the lab is required to reject this sample and we will not be able to accept it. The repeat sample submission. Repeat samples are required after a routine distribution sample is reported as positive for total coliform and or positive for E. coli bacteria. So you are required to collect 3 repeat samples, 1 at the original location, 1 upstream within 5 connections, and 1 downstream within 5 connections. All 3 of these repeat samples must be marked as repeat sample types on the microbial reporting form. And the identification, sample identification location should be identical to what is identified in your sample siting plan as well. Again, the date and time is required and the chlorine residual is required. The difference between this sample type and the routine sample type as far as marking it on the form, the sample ID and date of originating sample, the sample that was positive for total coliform or E. coli, is required in that middle box there, the 508123. That is the sample identification of the positive total coliform. You may not have this number. Once you get to the lab, you can request that the lab give you that number and make sure that that is noted on the microbial reporting form. The raw well sample submission, so the triggered source monitoring is also required following a total coliform positive distribution sample. The system is required to collect a raw well sample at each of the wells that was online serving water during that time. It's going to be marked as raw well, not as a repeat, even though it is a part of the repeat samples. But you are going to mark it as a raw well because it is prior to treatment. Again, the date and time is required. The sample ID and date of originating sample is there. The date of the originating sample isn't there, but the ID is there. And then, of course, the chlorine residual does need to be listed there. Although it's 0, it is prior to treatment. The chlorine residual absolutely has to be measured and recorded on the microbial reporting form at the time of sample collection. This is an assessment source monitoring. The only difference is it doesn't have that sample ID and date of originating sample because it isn't a sample that was required following a total coliform positive sample. Assessment source monitoring is required if you're trying to get a sanitary control easement or another requirement. The special sample submission, a special sample is not going to be counted towards compliance at all. So if you mark as special or construction as well, those are not going to be counted towards compliance. We cannot change them to be a routine or a repeat sample to count towards compliance. A special sample is only for your edification to see if the water in distribution is potable if you're doing construction. Again, this is a construction sample submission. The only difference is that it is marked as construction on the sample type. A replacement sample submission, if your lab has rejected your sample for a lack of chlorine residual or if it's heavy bacterial or a number of different reasons why your lab may have rejected the sample, you do have to take a replacement sample within 24 hours. You must mark the replacement sample box that is right next to the sample ID and date of originating sample box. You will mark the sample type as the same sample type as the sample that was rejected. Again, date and time is required and the chlorine residual. So here are some common microbial reporting form errors. Failing to enter an originating sample ID for a repeat or triggered source monitoring sample. Marking multiple sample types is also an issue. Failing to enter a source ID for well samples. You should all know your source ID. It begins with a G, your public water system name, and then A, B, C, D, E, etc. Or failing to enter a chlorine residual. This is absolutely denied always. So a change request may be requested if there are errors on the microbial reporting form, if there is missing information or it's inaccurate. The most common request that we get is an incorrect public water system ID number. We do need to have some sort of evidence to show that this sample was taken for a specific public water system. This is on a case-by-case basis. TCEQ will accept change requests with corroborating evidence, and it's not a guarantee. So to submit a change request, you do need to at least contact us, or we will contact you to begin communicating about if there is a possibility that we will accept the change request. To submit a change request, you print out the microbial reporting form, the original one with missing or inaccurate information, a single strike through the incorrect information. Whiteout will not do. We need to see the single strike through and the information that was actually corrected. You're going to write in the correct information above or below the strike through, and then you will initial and date that strike through, write a brief description of the correction in the margin of the form, and then a full signature and date next to that description. Once you send the corrected microbial reporting form to us, you also need to make sure that your lab has a copy of that corrected form for their records as well. This is an example of what a change request may look like. You will see that the public water system ID number is incorrect. They put a single strike through so we can still see the incorrect ID. They wrote the correct ID next to it, initial date, and a brief description, full signature, and a date. So these are the instances in which a change request will not be accepted. As I mentioned previously, changing a sample from a non-compliant sample to a compliant sample or vice versa. Special and construction samples cannot count towards compliance, cannot be counted as your routine or your repeat, and vice versa. If a chlorine residual is missing, that's an immediate rejection. Sample or signature is also very important. That's an immediate rejection. And the date and time a sample is collected, that will be rejected as well. These are the laboratory responsibilities. On the left picture, if you can't quite see it, it does say relinquished by at the top box. That would be used for the person who relinquished the microbial reporting form to the laboratory. So that is required by the public water system. All else is used by the laboratory. So here are some tips for sample submission. We really try to encourage public water systems and laboratories to review the microbial reporting forms at the time of relinquishing the MRF. It's so important on either side for all parties involved to make sure that the information on the MRF is correct and accurate. Some corrections and additions can be made before the lab takes custody if the lab notices that something is missing, like the public water system name or even the signature of the operator. That can be changed right there at the lab. But if the chlorine residual is missing, that cannot be changed. So any of the samples that are incorrectly marked on the MRF could be rejected. But of course, if you would like to see if you can submit a change request, just reach out to us. Again, here's our financial, managerial, and technical assistance program. If you have any questions, you can call LEAD 512-239-4691. It's a fabulous program. And small business and local government assistance as well. Does anybody have any questions for me?
I just
Get 'em.
did want to clarify that for the, if you're lifting a boil water notice, rescinding a boil water notice, the sampling that you should mark would be the special samples for the bacteriological.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that clarification.
Yeah, my name is Alfonso Murua with the City of Dallas. Just to be clear, when we submit a replacement, because let's say the lab invalidates a routine sample, we would check the replacement box, but do we have to check the routine box as well?
Yes, you would check the sample type as the same sample type that was rejected.
And on the box next to replacement, we put the ID of the original sample that was rejected.
That was rejected, correct.
And another question is, I believe we're allowed to have alternative sites?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so in case we, for some reason, say one of our regular sites is not available, so how would we indicate that?
So you just need to have your alternative sites listed on your sample siting plan. That's the only requirement. And then if you want to mark it as special or construction, just to ensure that it's an okay location. And then if you want to use it as a routine site, the only requirement is that it's listed in your sample siting plan.
And then we just mark routine. and
Correct.
that's it.
Yes.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions?
Just one item of interest I wanted to make sure anyone submitting through the E2 system is aware of, including the sample IDs and dates for replacements and originating positives are crucial to ensure that they are properly associated to either the rejected sample or the originating positive so that they get the correct credit, so to speak, under the rule to ensure that they met the triggering requirements. So please ensure that you're using those properly. The lab E2 submission guide online has great information as to what should be included and under what conditional requirements. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. That is one of the most common issues we have from an E2 perspective is not having that proper data so they can't associate correctly in the database.
If there aren't any other questions, we'll take a short 10-minute break. So meet back here at 10:15, and we'll start again with Catherine's presentation. Thank you.
Michelle, I have a question. You just talked about it. The E2 reporting for RTCR monthlies. So is that something that the lab has to be set up to do? So they have to report on behalf of the facility? Okay, right now we're having an issue with a couple of my facilities. Our lab, Test America, actually physically mails our results in somewhere to TCQ. They don't get them in time, whatever it might be, so then we have an issue for monitoring failure. And then we have to follow up and do all that to get it removed. So it would be better to try to get our lab set up with through E2 to report like that to avoid anything, because it's not a matter of fact of me having to do work and follow up. It's like our head up regional guys get there. So it's like.
I hate to say it, we tend to encourage people to vote with their dollars.
Okay.
Either indicate this is a big enough issue that I either need you to report electronically or I'm going to have to find someone else.
Right.
Because we can't force somebody to use that system. We don't have it within our rules to make the report electronically. But we can hold them accountable. We love to work with the water system. We prefer to work with the water system. We'll work through lab issues. But if it's a consistent lab issue, the other thing I would say is if you're consistently seeing that this is an issue with Test America, if you can bring that up to Mr. Gary Regner, we can have them do a corrective action, which is saying we're noticing you're having a problem, you need to fix that. And that sometimes is a good enough
Right.
for them to improve.
I didn't know that. I guess where I was lacking is I didn't know that was an option. So it's been going on for years, and So it's really just getting with my, I guess, the manager and saying, hey, can we do this? And if he says, sure. I don't know if they're doing it for other facilities or not, so at least if that option's on the board.
I'm trying to think of how you could see, me internally can see all the data, but under watching you can't see. So it's like you can go to someone else, see what lab rates you can see if it's coming in electronic. So yeah, I think that unfortunately the number one thing would be, I would like for you to do it this way. It's probably less issues.
Okay, no, I didn't. That's great to know. I just wanted to clarify that was an option, so I'll try there.
And if you're working through them and you're still having problems, like I said, sometimes if you ask them to do corrective action, that's enough for them to go, oh, you're
Oh, yeah,
we're
okay.
doing this,
All
right?
right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate
thank you.
Okay, folks. We took a couple of extra minutes here. I'd like to see if we can get started again. So let's go ahead and get started in the next 3 minutes. Well, since we've all quieted down here, let's get started here with Catherine McLaughlin. She's going to be presenting on cross-connection control and customer service inspections.
Great, thank you. So good morning. Like you said, I'm Catherine McLaughlin. I'm the cross-connection control program coordinator with the TCEQ. I recently assumed this position after Shannon, our acting coordinator, left. And I'm here to talk about cross-connection control and specifically customer service inspections. They're the missing link in a lot of cross-connection control programs, the foundation, the keystone, whatever you want to refer to it. They're incredibly important, and I'd like to spend a couple minutes today kind of expressing how and why and some TCEQ rules today. So to begin, we'll start by going over some of the TCEQs and the state of Texas's backflow regulations. We'll do a brief overview, and we'll also go into detail with some specific regulations for different parts of cross-connection control. But then we'll dive into the CSI requirements, the foundations, kind of the minimum requirements that the state of Texas has, but also some of the recommendations that we have for programs that are not reflected in our rules. So to begin, Texas Health and Safety Code, they require the protection of public water supplies from connection to water that is not of safe and sanitary quality. And this comes from 341.033 in particular. But TCEQ, we have a few more rules, and that's explored in Texas Administrative Code. And again, we'll go over that kind of deeper into depth later on in the presentation. So what exactly is a customer service inspection? A customer service inspection, it's a direct inspection of private premises plumbing in your water distribution on a customer side of the meter to ensure that the potable water is not vulnerable to contamination. So this goes inside of the connection, taking a look at different types of risks, hazards, and other types of things. And the reason that we do that, the purpose is to determine whether or not the water service can be provided to a site without any contamination risk. And there's a couple different things that a customer service inspection will look at. Direct and indirect cross connections, direct being plumbed in cross connections between a hazard and the public water supply, or an indirect cross connection, for example, something that could be removed and but isn't permanently plumbed in. Potential contamination hazards, for example, maybe a private well or a pool or something at that connection that could pose a hazard, and illegal lead materials. In the case of corrosive water, we want to prevent any potential lead contamination from flowing back into the potable water supply. So local rules for CSIs. In particular, 290.46I is the regulation that requires a public water supply to have either an ordinance, a tariff, or a customer service agreement with an enforcement clause to actually establish and support their cross-connection control program. Also, these should also address customer service inspections. The rule doesn't require it, but how are water system officials supposed to enter a connection and actually look for hazards and stuff? Let me see. So ideally, now we say they should have CSIs covered because this will allow them to enter and actually help support the program. Okay, so when exactly is a CSI required? A new construction, whenever a new connection is being put in, you want to see what the plumbing looks like and what hazards are actually being installed at that particular connection. A material improvement, correction, or addition to the private water system and at that connection. These include significant changes to existing plumbing. Significant is, it's kind of a wiggle room. We typically identify that as at least 25%, but that's up to the public water system to determine that too. A customer request for a larger meter, why exactly do they need a larger meter? That can spur on a CSI. Drilling a private well or a significant change, that would be installing a auxiliary water supply. So that would pose a hazard to the water supply if there was any direct connection. Finally, the third thing, and these are all supported in the TCEQ's official rules, when the water supplier believes there's a cross-connection or there potential contamination hazard, if there's a complaint or an observation, this allows the public water supply to go on site and actually look and see what exactly could be there. So when is it not required? And we get a lot of calls about these in our line. So no material change to plumbing. If there's construction but no changes to plumbing, then there's really, you're not exactly establishing any new direct cross connections. Construction connections and temporary connections, very similar, but these will go away over time. Transfer of service, but a change in occupancy. No change in plumbing, nothing has changed at the site. And mobile homes and manufactured homes. These also have additional rules attached to them, mobile homes do, so we'll go into that deeper into the presentation. So what is the CSI actually looking at? It's looking at potential contamination hazards, and there's some examples established in 290-38-66, which are the definitions, water cooling towers, beverage dispensers. A more thorough but not all-inclusive list is in 290-47F. We call it Appendix F. What it does, it's the assessment of hazards and required assemblies, so it gives tons of examples of types of hazards you might find, sewage, on-site septic systems, swimming pools, irrigation systems, and it's a very long, but again, it's not an inclusive list. If there's something that's not on the list but is very similar to another one of these things, we can use that to assess the hazard. So CSIs also look at internal cross-connection control programs. A CSI is used to determine whether or not an internal program is actually adequate or not. And adequate is something defined by the public water system. Now, we do require that internal programs have their health hazards and their connections and assemblies tested, but if everything else, all different hazards are looked at and tested on, and the PWS considers that an adequate program, they actually don't need anything at the meter. And we'll go into that. So the use of a backflow prevention assembly at a service connection is additional backflow protection and will not negate any of the internal protections that are actually protected on the inside. So something at the meter will be considered redundant and not necessarily necessary if the internal program is actually determined adequate by the PWS. Okay, so we get a lot of calls about this too. A CSI is not a plumbing inspection. They're done at around the same time, especially for situations like new construction, but a plumbing inspection looks at a completely different set of things and different set of rules. They're looking at compliance with adopted codes and ordinances related to plumbing, and they can be done at the same time by similar individuals, for example, a plumbing inspector. But they can be done in conjunction, but again, these are two separate forms, two separate things being looked at. Okay, so rule language requiring hazard protection. As you find potential contamination hazards, or the CSI finds potential contamination hazards, they need to be eliminated or protected against from the public water supply. And this goes into depth, looking at Appendix F, which is 290-47F of this title. And then if there's a health hazard determined, this gives the public water supply the ability to terminate water service. This is also supported in ordinances and certain customer service agreements, and they can be restored upon the installation of a backflow prevention assembly or whenever the health hazard has been isolated or removed. So this is another rule to support public water supplies with the ability to protect the public water system. So who can actually conduct a CSI? There's two separate entities that issue these people that, excuse me. Okay, sorry. Okay. So TCEQ issues CSI licenses through the Occupational Licensing Division, but also this Texas State Board of Plumbing Examiners. These folks issue the licensed plumbing inspector licenses, but also they also issue licensed plumber with a water supply protection specialist endorsement, which has different testing and regulations that kind of go into getting that particular endorsement. Okay, so the CSI and the cross-connection control programs documentation, you can find that on our website. It is Form 20699, which is the Customer Service Inspection Certificate. This particular form is the form that is required to be used throughout the state unless an alternate form is requested, which we'll go into in a moment. But this particular form includes a lot of the TCEQ's minimum requirements example, why are you inspecting it, some of the things that you're looking at, et cetera. So record-keeping requirements for CSIs, they're required to be kept a minimum of 10 years. We strongly encourage that the public water supply actually maintain them for longer. If there's an incident, you have historical information going back as to what's changed. And alternate versions of this form must be approved by the TCEQ. And what this means, a lot of the times public water supplies want to add or move around additional information, and you can always call our main line if you have any questions about this. But again, you have to use Form 20699 unless you request something. So CSIs at RV parks, in particular, we recommend periodic CSIs of RV parks, especially with different changing individuals coming in and out. And periodic is something that's determined by the public water supply. This could be every 6 months, it could be every 5 years. Again, this is something determined by the public water supply and not defined in the TCEQ rules. And again, we require that there's appropriate backflow prevention based on whatever hazards are available. So one of the concerns at RV parks is black water tanks, and you can have an RPZ or a sufficient air gap to prevent any back pressure. CSIs at mobile homes. This is a really unique situation. Our CSI is required on mobile homes and mobile home parks. Yes and no. Really, the answer is no, unless it is suspected that there is a cross-contamination hazard or any particular contamination source, just like is listed in the CSI form. But they're under special rules that are published by the Manufactured Housing Construction Safety Standards, and these aren't enforced by the TCEQ. These are actually enforced by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And again, CSIs at RVs and mobile home parks, something very unique. Water systems can be protected from contamination from RV and mobile home parks and their hazards with either premises isolation or internal protection. Again, this depends on what the CSI finds. So what is the importance of a customer service inspection in relation to a cross-connection control program? The importance is that it is the boots on the ground that get out there and actually determine what sorts of hazards are in your distribution system, and what is the importance of a cross-connection control program in providing safe potable water. The CSI is the first step in identifying these hazards, and it is the cross-connection control program is what's preventing whatever hazards from backflowing and risking the health of your customers. So message is, CSIs identify risks and hazards that could cause contamination, and TCEQ rules require accountability and require action to actually protect your public water supply. CSIs are again, they're the boots on the ground. They are the keystone of a successful cross-connection control program, and they are the rule in Texas. We do encourage, different requirements that exceed what our rules have, but they are the rule. So I'll take any questions if anyone has any. So.
Any questions?
I just want to say, as far as the inventory side of things, when we get a request for consolidation of say a business that had its own supply of water into a municipality, we do ask for a customer service inspection. So I just want y'all to keep that in mind, especially if one of your utilities has a smaller system consolidating in. Just know that if you have not done a CSI already, we will most likely ask you to do one. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, well then, thank you very much, Catherine. That was a very nice presentation. We appreciate the information. And now we're going to turn to the population and connection count guidance. Michelle Risco has been working on and has a presentation for you. Thank you.
Good morning, folks. As Patrick Kading mentioned earlier, we are coming up on PHS season, and the reasoning behind the guidance that was released in January of this year was to ensure that connections were being determined in a routine fashion across all regions so that the public health service fee could be administered in a uniform and equitable way. So that's the basis for everything that I'm about to present to you. The rule foundation will be discussed on all of these things, but the main point is, first of all, what is a public water system? Public health service fees only apply to public water systems, so therefore you need to be a public water system to pay this fee. Usually, if you look at the full definition of a public water system, it's dependent on meeting a minimum number of connections or a minimum number of people served. Therefore, the connection and population served guidance discusses the ability to determine and document each of these important characteristics of a water system. And then part of that, as Patrick mentioned, is we here in the Water Supply Division are relying on the regions to determine these connections and report them back to us through their comprehensive compliance investigations, or their CCIs, their sanitary surveys that happen on a 3 to 5 year basis depending on the type of system you have. So being prepared for that investigation, having your documentation in line can greatly assist both the investigator and your people within your system to understand what your population served and your connection counts are. So what's a public water system? Most of the time, most people deeply understand this, but the points that we're looking for are to make sure that you meet the definition, which is you serve a minimum of 25 people or 15 service connections. And bear in mind that 15 service connections is regardless of how many people you might serve. It's 15 connections and serves 25 or more. So if you have 15 active service connections, but you have very little business, you'd still technically meet the definition of a public water system. So for the exact definition, like I said, please feel free to take a look in there. It's available in our rules, and it is much longer than that quick little snippet. There are times whenever you might meet the definition of a public water system, but you're actually considered to be a consecutive connection of another water system. Those are the general applicability requirements that you'll see in 102A. So if you produce water or you provide treatment, you'll need to be your own standalone public water system. However, if you do not produce water, you don't have your own well, and you don't provide any treatment, you take water from another water system, and all you have is distribution facilities, you might meet that requirement. The next thing is that you would need to be subject to that water system's building restrictions and inspections. Like Catherine discussed, the ability for a water system to go on site at somebody who is hooked up to them is important for the protection of public health. It's a requirement that the water system has sanitary control over everyone they serve to prevent hazards from coming back into the water system. Therefore, this is a requirement for you to not be your own public water system. If you wanted to be a consecutive connection of someone else, you'd need to allow them inspection rights and allow them sanitary control of your facility. And usually you can document the fact that you are not buying water, because that's also a requirement of general applicability. So if you are buying water, but you're not selling it to anyone else, then you could potentially meet this requirement as well, because the crux of the matter is you cannot sell water and still be a consecutive system. So the general applicability rules, you'd have to meet every single one of these things. So one alone would not get you out of being your own public water system. So what is a connection? Often people think that a connection is just a single-family residence or a commercial industrial establishment, as you see in that first clause. But you go on to see that this is one of the longest definitions we have. So not only is it this page, but it's also this page. This is how long the whole definition of connection is. So what is a connection? It's a single-family residence or commercial industrial facility, and it goes on specifically in our rules to indicate, and an example is the number of service connections in an apartment complex. So in other words, if you have a master meter serving an apartment complex of 800 units, it's however many units are in that apartment complex, not the apartment complex itself. It goes on to indicate that if you have no other better data, we allow for a conversion of 3 to 1. So for each 3 people you serve, which we'll discuss population served, you can divide that by 3 in lieu of other better data. Our discussion with the population connection guidance is trying to get you to that better data, but if you can't get to that better data, then it allows for this conversion in the rule. It also indicates that for the purposes of connection, there are some times when the connection cannot be counted. And these are the reasons when it cannot be counted. So if this water is not intended for public consumption or human consumption, there are some water systems that have irrigation-only meters. The only reason that meter is in the ground is to service a irrigation system. That's it. No potable use whatsoever. That that connection does not need to be counted because it does not meet this definition of a connection. Another thing would be if the ED, the TCEQ, indicates that the alternative water being provided to people is of equal public health protection. This is not commonly used. To my knowledge, it's not used at all. And then finally, it would also be is if you had point of entry treatment, which was equally equivalent. In order to demonstrate that, you'd have to test for every single thing that a public water system tests for, so you're not really reducing any regulatory burden. And to my knowledge, also, this has not been used. The main reasoning would be is if you were having an irrigation-only connection. So let's talk connection data. Total number of connections, active plus inactive equals total. The reasoning behind this is if a connection exists, it could be active today and inactive tomorrow. What matters is that the potential is there to serve someone. If you are say you're a city and somebody moves out of their house, what are the chances somebody's not going to move in tomorrow or next week? That's why the connection is always there, that potential to serve, and that potential demand is always present. Same thing with an RV park. Somebody can literally roll up tomorrow with an RV. So that's what those connections are looking at. It's the need to be able to produce water and make sure that water is safe for everyone as soon as they are there and they're receiving service. As I indicated earlier, it's pretty darn clear in the definition as far as apartments go that multi-unit dwellings are served by a mass meter, and it's a matter of the connections that they serve. This is very clearly stated for apartments in the connection guidance, but that also begs to differ. Okay, so if an apartment complex is, each one of those units is, it's a kitchen, it's a shower, it's all the things we would normally use for human consumption. Well, that's residential in nature. So is a long-term care facility where, once again, there are units that are all being served through a master meter. Each person uses that as their residence, and they're doing all of their residential water use. That seems to be very similar in use and protection to people and getting the right amount of water to those people for all of their daily usage, all of their human consumption needs. So multi-unit dwellings would also apply to those types of situations. Where can you get this unit data? Well, whenever you put in, as a city, application to build a apartment complex, you're generally disclosing the number of units. So there should be historical records in the planning department or in the building permits department, or potentially, if you don't have either of those, at the real estate records within your jurisdiction. So how do we define population? If you look in our rules, you won't see population as a definition. But within the public water system definition, you'll see population served and how they indicate population served should be determined. That's where we rely on for population served. So population served is the total number of individuals served based on the data provided by the system, and that's going to be people who are using that water on a routine basis. So for community systems, that's going to be people who actually live there. We often determine that with census data or the city's population determination that they do in non-census years. If you are, say, a prison, the TCDJ keeps information about the population that is housed within that facility. If you are a non-transient, non-community industrial complex, you know how many employees you have. You know how many people are there every day, how many people are there from time to time. So that's where that data can be determined. So as indicated in the definition, it does say that when systems cannot provide sufficient data, we can use census data or other reliably provided populations connection data to take total connections and multiply it by 3 to get your population served. So in lieu of better data, once again, the conversion can occur, but we'd prefer for you to have, quote unquote, better data, documented data. So acceptable population data would be things like the census. That's a very well available, posted on the internet type of information. There is a caveat to this, though. So, for instance, say you're the city of Austin and you have multiple water systems within your city limits. You'd be double counting. You'd be counting those people under you whenever they really aren't you. You can go down as far as a zip code, can go down as far as a census block, but you'd have to really dig deep into census information if you are not the exclusive provider in your service area. So that's why we'd encourage water systems to know what your service is, who you actually serve. If you are an apartment complex, your rental agreements, how many people are you serving? How many rental units, some people have restrictions on there's only 2 people per unit, or you can have up to 6 people with children. Those are the kind of things that we can determine from a rental agreement. Once again, if you're a non-transient, non-community, employee records, how many people are here, how many shifts do you have? Guest logbooks for a bed and breakfast, how many people are you serving on a regular basis? You're a gas station and people are coming in routinely to get soft drinks and use your restroom. What kind of receipts do you have to indicate the number of people you're serving on a regular basis? Those are the kind of documents we can look at to help you determine, and that the region can use to determine population served. If you have a population update that needs to come through to us, that can be something that you submit to the Public Water System Inventory, so pwsinven@tceq.texas.gov. Once we receive that, the inventory will review any documentation you submit. We'll also try to obtain those third-party documentations like the census data. We'll review that information, but in the end, we will not make a change unless we have concurrence from the region. So bear in mind it may take some time, because not only will we do the research, but we'll provide that research to the region, and they will determine whether they believe this to be representative of your system, because they have the on-the-ground boots knowledge of what's going on at your system, what your system looks like. There are 7,000 of you out there. We're not familiar with all of them, but there are 16 regions, and they have a much more manageable chunk of that. So provide that information to us, and we'll check on the concurrence. Same thing would happen with population connection values. What I would say is, if you are scheduled to have a comprehensive compliance investigation, have your information available right then and there. Provide it as part of your CCI documentation to your investigator, and that way you know what's going into that report. Very often that will come across in their draft report to you, or in their exit interview or exit summary. That, once again, is what we at Central Office are relying on. So how does this affect you? Well, compliance. Water Supply Division, we are looking at those quote-unquote official numbers of population connections served in order to determine the proper monitoring for your water system. Specifically, sometimes the quantity or type of sample sites, and then, of course, the intent of the document, which was to make sure fees are uniformly determined. So just to kind of give you an idea, these are right out of the rules. You can see them yourselves, but for revised total chloroform rule, depending on your population, you'll have 30 different population breaks that could affect your number of sample sites based on the population we have for you. DLQR, it's how often you have to check and how often you have to report. Some things, even lead and copper, especially those things that are related to your distribution system, they're population determination. It also may be, okay, so you have certain population, but some population is residential in nature, some population is transient in nature. That helps determine what type of system you are. So if you have 5 residences, but really you are a refinery, and those residences were just there before you were a refinery, we're not going to call you a community water system. So you won't be receiving the full monitoring for a community water system. So the type of things you might have to monitor could change as well. And then, of course, based on what type of source you have, monitoring changes as well. There are lots of breaks. You can see where those fall based on your population, but most of the ones that will affect folks are either the RTCR breaks or the disinfection byproducts breaks. Purchased water systems, same type of thing, especially when it comes to the disinfection byproducts. There are, I think, 15 different options here. And coliform, as I indicated, there are 30 different breaks. This is something that you can see straight out of the guide, straight out of the book. It's in 109D2, and literally based on your population, it will change everything from a 1 increment to, as you get into the deeper, 30 increment sample sites. Lead and copper compliance, the same type of thing. Based on the population served you have, that will affect the number of sample sites you have and how many you have to take on initial versus routine. also water quality parameters, which are based on the same data for LCR. PHS fee. So like I said, this is the intent behind this guidance, is to make sure this is done uniformly. You can see how that is written out in 29051, but here's the general breakdown. For a system with fewer than 25 connections, this fee is flat. So once you meet the definition of a public water system, whether you have one connection that serves plenty of people and puts you over the definition, or whether you have 15 connections that serve the bare minimum 25, you'd fall into this $125 category. If you are a system that has between 25 and 160, once again, whether it's 26 or whether it's 160 exactly, you're going to be paying a flat fee of $200. For a system that's greater than or equal to 161, this is where we have an incremental fee per connection. Right now in the rule, it's set at a maximum of $4 per connection, but really the current fee is $2.45. So there's a lot of growth that could happen in the future, but you know, nobody likes to pay more bills, so hopefully that doesn't. So just some examples. If you're a community water system and you have 23 connections and 120 residents, what's the associated fee? Well, 23 connections is less than 25, so you're going to pay $125 flat. If you're a non-transient, non-community, you have 26 connections and you're only serving 20 employees, what's the associated fee? Well, 26 is greater than 25, so you're going to pay flat $200. Community water system, you have exactly 160 connections and a population of 500. What's the associated fee? 160, that's the cutoff, 160. You're going to pay a $200 flat fee. Non-transient, non-community, you have 162 connections and a population of 300. Well, now you've broken over that 160 barrier. You're going to have an incremental fee for each connection, $396.90. So you can go through and look at your population connection, which are available online in Drinking Water Watch, and determine what your connection would be. Like I said, for the exact rule, take a look in there. For a very small number of people, you could be a non-transient, non-community with very few connections but serving a whole bunch of people. Think of an industrial complex where you only have, say, a bathroom and a break room, but you have hundreds of people on shift. That's where we would get into dividing a population served by 10 to determine your connections. Like I said, please take a look on Drinking Water Watch. You'll see that the R here is circling what type, so in this case it's residential, and the population served is 50. And then down in the service connection area, you'll see that they have a count of 170. So they'd be able to determine that they have 170 times the incremental rate. Like I said, once again, preparing for the CCI, if you're a community system, you should expect this to happen on a roughly once every 3-year basis. If you're a non-community system, you should expect this once roughly every 5 years. If you look at this and you can prepare your documentation, you can help the region to determine this accurately. You can know what your fee will be, and you can ensure that that's budgeted correctly and communicated well to your board or your council or whomever, so that no one's surprised when they get their bill. Accurate information benefits you, and that way we also make sure that all the sampling schedules are right and the fees are correct. And good data can save you time and money, so if you can get that data, one big research effort, and then as new things are added, you can keep track of those and just add them on, then this can benefit you long term. Okay? Does anybody have any questions? We did receive some feedback from people who weren't able to attend today, so we'll be addressing that specifically. But a couple of things that have come up in the past is discussion about prisons and the potential of serving those and determining how many people that really represents. So that's something that we're hoping to, even though we addressed it in the population served portion of the guidance, we didn't necessarily address it in the connection portion of the guidance. As the rule allows, it indicates that you can, in lieu of better data, take the population served and divide it by 3 to get connections. So if for, say, security reasons, a prison's unwilling to share with you the number of connections they have, you can potentially apply that if a prison is in your service area.
Just have a real quick question, I guess. I know that y'all are trying to get this better accurate data to calculate fees. So I was just wondering, I mean, are y'all anticipating an impact? Because I guess for some of us and for some of the water systems, I understand with fees it's related to connections, but are y'all expecting this new way of how y'all are looking at the number of connections to that potentially impact capacity requirements, since capacity is driven by the number of connections that you have? Because I guess we were looking at some of the guidance, and there were some very specific examples about how y'all were looking at specific, like even businesses, and whether you counted that. What some of us might have routinely expected, maybe just one connection, were being counted as two connections. So I was just curious if y'all are anticipating whether there's going to be any potential impact on the capacity requirements and stuff for systems.
As you pointed out. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Yes, because because connection is used to determine and calculate that there's a potential there for that. Bear in mind that we haven't necessarily changed how we're looking at connection. This is all based on what's in the rule and what legal precedent was out there. So it may be more a matter of uniformly applying it. But some of those things that people have seen in the examples are also more a matter of, okay, so you're a community water system, you're serving in an office building, which is just industrial in nature or commercial in nature. That's one for you. However, if you're a standalone public water system and we have to determine what your public water system is, if you're just an office building, that's when you get into those specifics of uses of area and all that kind of stuff. So it might be a matter of more understanding of how the precedent is out there to better get that communicated across. But yes, there is a potential, and Joel and myself are looking into it. And like I said, we'll communicate to you as we develop that further.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you, Cecilia. Are there any other questions? Okay. Well, then let's move on to Patrick Cadian's presentation on some upcoming changes to the public notice rule. Thank you, Patrick.
All right. Thank you. My name is Patrick Kading, team leader for the Drinking Water Inventory and Protection team. And we're just going to talk about one of the rules, or one of the bills that was passed in this last legislative session that will impact our rules. And let's get this started. So in the 86th legislative session, there were several fluoride-related bills that were proposed, but only one made it through and was enacted, and that is House Bill 3552, which requires public water systems to notify customers when they are terminating the addition of fluoridation, or terminating the addition of fluoride for their potable water. So here is the act as it was enacted. An owner, agent, manager, operator, or other person in charge of a public water system that furnishes for public or private use drinking water containing added fluoride may not permanently terminate the fluoridation of the water unless the owner, agent, manager, operator, or person provides written notice to the customers of the system and to the commission at least 60 days before the termination. So, what we are looking at as far as proposed rule changes, we are considering adding language to specify that the public water system needs to notify the TCEQ plan review area when they are planning on terminating that fluoridation, and we're looking at that would be before the notice to your customers goes out, and then also adding language in the public notice area 290.122, specifying how that public notice to your customers should be delivered and when. The key things to that we're interpreting the bill as being direct delivery. The bill's talking about providing written notice, so we're interpreting that as direct delivery to customers, which is usually done through mail. And then the other key thing to that is 60 days prior to the termination of fluoride. So, like I said, what we're looking at is a direct mail out to your customers 60 days prior to termination. Just some key dates as far as our rule implementation. I want to note all of these dates are tentative, so they might shift around a little bit, but we are looking at the March 25th, 2020 agenda to introduce the proposed rule changes. And if we stick with that agenda to introduce the proposed rule changes, we'd be looking at a public comment period from about April 10th to May 10th, and there will be a public hearing at some point in that time period. Obviously, when all of these details get firmed up, we will be sending out notice for that. And then, if everything stays on track, we're hoping that we can have the rules adopted in the August 26th, 2020 agenda. And then that would put it, the effective date of these new rules at around September 2020. So once again, these dates are all tentative at this time, but this is kind of the rough outline of what we are looking at. And that's really all I had for this right now. I just kind of want to give a heads up that this is what we are working on, and there will be opportunities for public comment, and if you have any concerns or questions about this, please feel free to reach out to us, and we want to make this as straightforward as possible. So if you have any suggestions or concerns, please let us know. Are there any questions at this time?
Patrick, what's the effective date of the legislation?
The effective date was September 1st of 2019.
So are public water systems required to comply with the legislation prior to us putting our rules in?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So FYI, if you have or are planning to terminate fluoridation, be aware that this statute exists. Therefore, reach out to us for communication. There may not be a rule determining how it should happen, but we can help coordinate that with you to make sure you stay within the statute. I think there was someone over here, Sean.
Johnny Partain, City of Dallas Water Department. If we have like a problem at the plant and we have to stop fluoridation for a short period of time, 30 days, does that require notification?
So this bill is intended for the permanent termination. So as far as this, no, but I in general, I would suggest, communicating with your customers in general for things like that. But as far as this bill is concerned, the bill is directed at the permanent termination. But like I said, as far as customer service and letting your customers know what's going on, I think that's always it would be a good idea to let them know. Any other?
So I'm curious on direct delivery, why mail only when CCR direct delivery includes electronic delivery?
So I guess I was more speaking in general, that would be covered by mail, but yeah, you're right. There are a couple different methods of direct delivery. Basically, it would fall in line with the existing direct delivery requirements for public notice.
One thing I did want to point out is that being 60 days and being something that's prior versus in arrears, which is what is typical for public notice, we're kind of trying to make sure that we don't try to throw something completely crazy at you, something that you're already comfortable with and you know how to use, but we're applying it to an area where it wasn't applied before because it wasn't a requirement. So we'll try to use, things you are familiar with to make sure this is as easy to implement as possible. We just want to directly take what the rule, what the statute is saying and put it into rule as clearly as possible.
Are there any other questions? Okay, well with that, I think we'll wrap up. Oh, Carrie Michelle has a comment.
Okay, so we've thought a lot about DWOG and some of the different things that we could be doing differently. And I know a lot of you watch through VTC, but I'd sure like to find a way that we can get you all to come in, because I think it's important for all of us as stakeholders to engage with you all, okay? And we tend to do this at our PDW conference, but unfortunately, I really see a potential here where we can do some different things in DWOG. And so I'd like to get some feedback from you all, particularly one, how we can engage with you so that we're having more conversations. I know that this is kind of deemed as a regulatory update, but there's a whole lot of things that are going on in drinking water that I think we need to start having conversations about. And I think this is a really good forum to do that. One of the things I'd really like to focus on is that, we do a lot of technical assistance and we see things that happen all the time. And I think talking about some case studies and some things that we're running into out in the field is really important to talk about, and really important to talk about some of the trouble that you guys are having. I think some of the challenges that for us, whether or not it's surface water or groundwater, or that we're talking about people who run systems versus the policy guys that are implementing the rules, it's kind of hard because each of you represent a different area within your utility. But I really would like some feedback from you all about what conversations that we can be having to make this a little bit more fruitful for everybody. I'd like to have some case studies where we talk about some of the things that we've run onto at systems that seem to be a prevailing issue for us. I think there are lots that are happening. I'd like to see a lot more operators engage with us and talk to them a little bit about what they're seeing. I think TCEQ is really seeing a shortage in operators, and the fact that you guys are struggling with some things that we can help with. So I would like you all, beginning in January, we're going to start seeing some changes, and I really think it's important that you all give us feedback from that. We're all about providing information, but I also want to make this a useful tool. That we've got some lessons learned and some challenges and problems that you guys are running out into in the field and talking about those situations. Joel's staff, the top staff, Texas Optimization Program, they're doing a whole lot of technical assistance, and they're seeing the same things when they go out in different situations. So if you've got some subject matter that you'd really like to discuss, that's great, and we really want to hear from you, so please submit some stuff to that Drinking Water, the DWOG web box.
DWAWG at tceq.com, or .com, tceq.texas.gov.
Okay. So please submit that, but if not, we're going to start tweaking it up a little bit and making some changes. Please let us know what you all want to see, because again, there's so much going on in drinking water that I really would like a robust conversation with stakeholders to be talking about those challenges and using this as a forum. This isn't just about what TCEQ has going on. I want to know what's going out on the field. Just like Dorothy said, we want to hear from you. And so I want to start having robust, engaging conversations with stakeholders so that we understand what it's like to be in your shoes. We have that at PDW conference. I'd like to see that same kind of thing going on here. Does anybody have any comments or suggestions or something particularly that you'd like to focus on that we can kind of start changing up in January for this forum? No? Okay. So if you'd like to submit something, go ahead and submit it. If you got some ideas, if not, we'll start having a little different things, and you guys can provide comments on that if that's something you like or don't like. Thank you.
With that, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all very much for coming. We appreciate it.